Ghanatube sunyi modafo snowy masan so atena se ensema wodo ekoso ewo man Ghana mu wonsa ebeka matena sisei de ene makwakopoa ensem ano ede ebro ebusianfo entempa no dimechi na yenkotie ensem ni bi.
Just one more question. This just breaking a few minutes ago. President Mahama fulfilling his campaign promise, giving assent to the bills to abolish the betting tax, e-levy, and the emissions tax, amongst others. How significant is this in easing the burden on Ghanaians and driving economic growth? Your reaction to that?
Hello, please can you come again?
Yeah, I was just saying, just as we were going on air, those news that the president had assented to the bills abolishing e-levy, betting tax, and emissions tax. I just wanted your reaction on how this is going to ease the burden on the Ghanaian public and also drive economic growth.
All right, sure. You recall that the cancellation of the e-levy was received as a good news by businesses and individuals in this country. You also recall that mobile money transaction has significantly reduced as a result of the implementation of the e-levy. And so once the president has assented to the bill, technically, one, we expect financial inclusion to be enhanced. We also expect mobile money transaction levels to go up, and that will also translate into revenue for the telecommunication companies. So I think that the cancellation of those levies is a good news for businesses and individuals. Now, when you also take the betting levy into consideration, it was one of the topical issues that was discussed during the election period. And I think that has also brought some relief to young men and women who are investors within the domain of betting. So I think generally it's a good news. Businesses will respond positively to that. Individuals and households will also respond positively to the cancellation of those levies because they were considered to be nuisance levies or nuisance taxes for the Ghanaian economy. In any case, e-levy itself has not contributed significantly towards the domestic revenue mobilization. The idea behind the e-levy, once the e-levy comes on board, then the tolls will be taken up. But you realize that the quantum of revenue that we were generating from the tolls was much better and higher than that of e-levy. And so I think the cancellation is a step in the right direction. It's going to boost economic activity. It's going to increase significantly mobile money transaction, and it's also going to promote, financial inclusion and even raking the informal sector who are not really within the banking system. Don't forget, in our villages, the only source of financial transaction is mobile money, and we take it off of these levies. That is going to enhance and promote the inclusivity within the banking sector.
All right, Nelson Kudjo-Kwagwaji, Head of Finance, UMB Capital, appreciate your analysis and insight. Thank you. As always, rate for March 2025 slowed to 22.4%, down from 23.1% in February, according to data released by the Ghana Statistical Service in Accra today. The decline is attributed to a slowdown in the general price levels of certain food items, marking the second consecutive drop in food prices. This is the lowest inflation rate the country has seen since November 2024. Here's Government Statistician Professor Samuel Kobneni.
Highlights for March 2025 rate of inflation. In the month of March 2025, year-on-year inflation stood at 22.4%, which simply means that general price levels of goods and services between March 2024 and March 2025 went up by 22.4%. This indicates a slowdown in rate of inflation, as year-on-year inflation for the month of February 2025 stood at 23.1%, slowing down by 0.7 percentage points to 22.4% for March 2025. Disaggregating this from a food and non-food perspective, we recorded a 7.8 percentage point difference between food inflation, which stood at 26.5%, and non-food inflation, which stood at 18.7%. In the month of March 2025, we have recorded a much sharper decline in food inflation, which declined by 1.6 percentage points, and a marginal decline in non-food inflation, which declined by 0.1 percentage points between February 2025 and March 2025. From a locally produced item and inflation on an imported item perspective, we recorded a 5.3 percentage point difference, with inflation on locally produced items 24.0% for the month of March 2025 relative to 18.7% for inflation on imported items, leading to the 5.3 percentage point difference between inflation for locally produced items and inflation on imported items. From a regional perspective, we recorded approximately a 2 times difference between the region that recorded the highest rate of inflation, which was Upper West region, which recorded a rate of inflation of 36.2%, relative to the Volta region, which recorded the lowest rate of inflation of 18.9% for the month of March 2025. From a month-on-month perspective, general price levels of goods and services went up by 0.2% in the month of March 2025, indicating a 1.1 percentage point difference monthly inflation between February 2025, which stood at 1.3%, relative to 0.2% for the month of March 2025. Disaggregating monthly inflation from a food and non-food perspective, we saw general price levels of food prices between February and March 2025 going down by 0.2%, in other words, termed as deflation for the month of March 2025.
And joining me on Zoom with reaction is Head of Finance at UMB Capital, Nelson Kudjo-Kwagbaji. Good afternoon to you, sir. Your thoughts on the March inflation rate and what's your assessment based on the trend we've seen from the beginning of the year? Can you hear me, Nelson? Can you hear me, Nelson?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alex, for. I think that
you're muted.
Can you hear me directly?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Right. So thank you very much. As I did, for the was 23%, then it came down 23.5% in January, and then 23.1% in February, and currently 22.4% in the month of March. I think the economy is actually responding to the overall policies that the government is implementing, both at the fiscal policy level and at the monetary policy level. So I think the reduction in inflationary pressure for the conservative framework basically has to do with the policy that the government is implementing, and these policies having positive impact on the overall economy.
Right. So we are told that the slowdown in the inflation rate is because of the drop in the prices of certain food items. How sustainable is this trend, though?
Well, the medium term, the trend is manageable. It's manageable within the medium term. However, within the medium to long term, I think the government has to be deliberate and intentional about policies within agri sector. Don't forget that per the data released by the Ghana Statistical Service, food supply continues to be a major driver of our inflationary basket. And so the government has to be more intentional. The government has to be more deliberate on policies within the agri sector. Within the short term, that may be manageable because of the policy that the Bank of Ghana and the Finance Ministry implement. But going forward, we need to invest more in agriculture in order to curb the food inflation that is driving the overall inflation of the country.
Madam Azza Mudi Mechi Kotie and Sema Hodo, I also ewo on my Ghana. I was a phobit me edo comments no, Ewukimi, na Mejebre Akinkanina Ediamo. Aha, Ghanatube, so open Semitia, and all the winning achuma, and also wait me subscribe now doing sa emia bell no so Eddie Amame Fefe, aha, Ghanatube, so see a dear, my crown.